Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Costin.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusion Podcast. Today is going to be all about resource rooms. So, Christy, if I were to count the number of times that I've heard, but this student needs a resource room.
Can you count that high? Or do you get $1 for every time you get to count it? I don't know. What if?
Yeah, thank you. I'd be a millionaire. I didn't really follow it. I was going to get $1 each time, and then it could be
Yeah. I was excited for you.
Yeah. So, but the student needs a resource room. And I just want to unpack that statement today.
Yeah. The problems with it, the myths about it. And I guess for me, Julie, the disclaimer is this is just another one of our historical special ed practices that has seen its time, if you will. You know, like go into your closet and go, oh, I just love that shirt. But really, no one's going to let you wear it because it's like from the 80s. Now, it might come back into vogue, but only on 80s Day, right? And we purposely dress up funny and do things. We don't do it in like seriousness. And so to anyone who has resource rooms in their building, teaches resource, we don't mean this to be a dig. It's meant to say that time has come and we need to think differently. And so to be part of the solution, like, okay, where can I use my gifts and talents in this district? How can I help support a student if not in a resource room? Okay.
So when someone says the student needs a resource room, I struggle right just with the sentence itself. Okay, is there something special about the room, the four walls? No. Is there something special about the air in the room? No. Is there something special about the human that's going to be in that room? And what I want to say is maybe, but that someone is portable. Yes. And that someone can be right in their general education classroom supporting them there.
But Julie, they can't be in every gen ed classroom.
True. And so we've got to really look to see what supports are going to be necessary so the student can be successful. And so we've got to think about what doesn't work about resource rooms and sort of debunk some of the myths that have come along with resource rooms.
And so today's handout, you can grab it at any time, is at inclusiveschooling.com/download 46. And we're going to give you a critical look at how when we pull out, pull over, pull aside, or what we call segregated supports, what are the problems? Like, why is that an issue? Why does it matter that it's an issue? Why are we caring that this is an outdated practice? And then as we talk, we're going to give an example of some of the things that we think we're doing by having a resource room option, but what's really actually happening for the students. Where do you want to start, Julie? With some of the issues or the example or the download?
Well, I'm really glad you shared where the download is. And I think we'll talk about some of the myths that come with what we think is true. So a lot of people think resource rooms provide the best support for students with disabilities. In fact, even sometimes we'll hear parents that are fighting for a resource room. And the reality of resource rooms is what we're wanting to talk about today. It is not what you think it is. Christy and I spent lots of times traveling the country, going into resource rooms and seeing what we see there. And we just got back from a recent location where we saw, again, the exact same problems with resource rooms. Christy, describe what do you see? Would you say it's the best support for students with disabilities?
No. And again, we know we haven't seen every resource room. However, we've seen enough. And just recently, we saw 3 practices in 3 different districts that were exactly the same because they were using the same curriculum. And so we think we're doing small group. We think, how's that, Julie? I think we think that a resource room is safer, more personalized, that the small group instruction is more intense. And I say that particularly around reading because part of what people think and what's in a lot of curriculum is repeated practice, more direct instruction, if you will, by an expert where there's errorless learning. And I get multiple opportunities, especially to learn something I haven't yet learned.
Mm-hmm.
So my class has gone on. The curriculum page has been turned. I didn't get the earlier skill, or I'm a newcomer, or I have a disability label. And so people think, okay, more concentrated, direct instruction that's errorless by an expert in the curriculum will sort of solve the problem. Is that sort of what we would say we think is happening?
Yeah. Now describe what we see that happens.
Okay, so oftentimes, let's say we go to a middle school. Let's just pick the middle of the road. We'll go to a middle school and we're going to pick on reading for a minute because I think it's most pervasive when it comes to reading curriculum. And we have a small group. So there's maybe 3 or 4 kids and usually at least 2 or 3 adults. So the ratio seems, or the, one adult, one kid, because we got a lot of Velcro going on. And we have already said in many different podcasts that the Velcro effect has issues. So maybe sidestep for a minute, Julie, before I finish saying what we see. What's the problem if I go, but Julie, I've got 3 adults and 3 kids. Yay for me. And we're like, no.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, because the room that you're thinking of and the rooms that we see all the time, the additional adult support, additional adults aren't providing additional support. So in the case that you're about to talk about, the paraprofessional that was in the room was at the back of the room and on their own computer doing perhaps preparing for something ahead of time.
Perhaps
or something else.
Data collection, maybe.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
wink, wink.
It looked as if the person was doing something very, very different than the students.
And I would say oftentimes we see the other adult participating in the activity far more than the students.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. So anyway, let's say we go into a middle school classroom that's a resource room. So the kids, the 3 or 4 kids have been pulled out from the general curriculum where they're learning grade level content with their peers, where these other humans that have expertise in reading instruction could be planning the lesson, supporting the lesson, even tracking progress right there in the general ed classroom. So let's just say, for lack of a better example, because we saw it so many times in the last couple of months, that let's say the kids need blending, need practice on blending letters. So whatever that might be, like a TH, a GR, an SW, any kind of blend. Sorry if I made up ones that aren't. And we're going to give them repeated practice. So in theory, our curriculum says, but Julie, let's start off with grade level content. A middle schooler learning blends.
Right. So what I know to be true about the example that you're giving is they were pulled out of regular ELA where they were reading the book The Giver. And so instead of learning that rich, interesting content about the book The Giver, they instead were working on blending over here in a small room with an educator. Now, a couple more things. So what that is it's lowering expectations. We're saying this kid is reading a first grade content or curriculum. They're not getting access to robust literature. They're learning about SW, TH, etc. This specialist, and I'm going to put it in quotes, was not an expertly trained specialist in teaching reading. I could tell by watching what was happening. They were just taking the blends and brainstorming and brainstorming and brainstorming and brainstorming words that started with that blend. And what we see is nobody was getting more individualized support. They were running it like a general education classroom, raise and respond. People were sharing their ideas, etc.
Yeah. So it's like all of the poor practices that we know are ineffective, where we, like Julie just said, raise and respond, we know has very, very little chance of getting engagement. We think there's going to be repeated practice of these blends, the BL, the CL, the SW, the TW, when in fact, we're waiting so long between teacher prompts and student response that it becomes more like a guessing game. And then I thought, well, maybe we're working on vocabulary. And then I thought, well, maybe we're working on social interactions like exchanges. And then I thought, well, maybe we're working on, right? Like I was trying to figure out what is the skill I'm actually being taught here. Whereas if it was a really concentrated opportunity to work on blends, it should have been obvious to me that we're only working on blends and we're going to do that in an errorless way, following the curriculum. Whether that's good, bad, or otherwise, I would at least say it was being done with fidelity, or I would at least say there were multiple opportunities for every student. One student didn't lift their head from their desk. One student was on the left-hand side of a student of the classroom and never had eye contact by the teacher. I'm guessing because they weren't responding. And so, like me, when I present, if somebody gives me like a verbal or a head nod or engages, I'm all about them, right, Julie? I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I'll talk to you. Those people in the back with their arms crossed that don't care what I'm saying, I kind of forget they're there. But I see that across classrooms too. So we don't even have, other than through osmosis, which I know that's not osmosis, but meaning I'm breathing the same air, I didn't get any practice opportunities if I was on the other side of the classroom where the teacher didn't really attend.
So, if I were to boil down the story that we're trying to share with you
Yeah.
today, it's to say that what we say is happening in resource rooms is not happening in resource rooms.
Okay, that's a great way to say it.
What we say is happening there is there's magic and there's a single attention and it's repeated practice and it's a highly trained professional and it's all this stuff. And it never is. And when I say never, you might tell me that that is not true in your school system or not true when you teach. Okay, maybe. And we see it nonstop all the time. It's a place to hold kids who struggle with phonetics and they're not getting access to the giver or whatever is happening in the general education classroom. You can still be learning the giver and blends at the same time by finding all the places you see a TH, an SW, etc. within the giver and starting to pull that out while we're learning interesting content, not
Yeah.
first grade content.
Yeah, I think that's the kicker, Julie, is we don't think we can teach multiple outcomes in the general ed curriculum, but then we do a resource room where we are teaching multiple outcomes,
Right.
right? Like we weren't just teaching blends in that classroom.
Well, it was really poor instruction, so it's so hard to even explain what was being taught. And when I say in that classroom, I'll say in almost
one.
all of the resource rooms
that
we've
one,
been
yeah.
to.
Yeah, it's
I-
like we're just
it's-
thinking of different ones at certain times. So when we say that, we're like that one over there and that one over there. And so you can get today's download, which we hope will give you some talking points, which is a critical review. So at inclusivschooling.com/download 46, we're going to give you 10 reasons why, or 10 things that are supported in the research, the lived experiences, our observations, to be quite honest, about why these segregated supports aren't working. And we're not saying, oh, just keep the kid in the general curriculum, read off a grade level, and never teach them the foundations of reading. Julie said, you can still work on blending in the context of grade level content that's interesting with my peers who I like and have friendships with. And then we can kind of layer it, or the same activity has multiple access points with it. Julie, is there something from the handout you want to kind of draw
Yeah.
attention to?
So there are 10 problems that we highlight in this handout, and they're really, really important. The first is that in resource rooms, we're going to see social isolation. Kids have to leave their peers to go into a special education classroom. Across the board, we see lowered expectations in resource rooms. Across the board, we see missed opportunities for peer learning. In that
Yeah, for
example that
sure.
Christy was talking about, there were no students who were models to other students because all students were struggling with the same thing. Another problem is stigma and labeling. So we walk to a resource room and it reinforces negative stereotypes, how students are visibly pulled out. The fifth one is reduced access to general curriculum. These kids don't get to read the giver. They don't get to know what it's about. And again, that has long-term consequences. There's inefficiencies in time and scheduling, which means transitioning to and from resource rooms are quite problematic.
And that was number 6.
That's right. You want to talk about 7?
Okay, so number 7, limited professional collaboration. Again, we want to learn from each other. We want to do role release, role extension. We want to be creative, like Julie said in other episodes where we talked about the importance of co-teaching or differentiation or creating access points. That comes from collaboration. Number 8 is the challenges of what I'm using air quotes, reintegration. It just means it's a one-way street. That is often hard when I've missed, let's say I miss a dance class one week because I'm traveling with Julie. It's hard for me the next week because even though I have the video and I tried to practice on my own, I still missed all the conversations, all the nuances, all the learning that first time learners had the week I was gone. Number 9, there's really a lack of evidence. This is why we say it's an outdated practice or a practice that has seen its time. We have more effective strategies now. Since the 80s, we know more about effective universal design. We know more about co-teaching. We know about supporting even students who are newcomers. We have so much more research. And then number 10, because we know the benefits of inclusion, it's a missed opportunities to gain all of those amazing benefits that inclusion brings. And that download with those 10 critical talking points for discussion or for awareness, inclusiveschooling.com/download 46. And Julie, what would you just sort of end it with? I thought it was super helpful when you were saying resource rooms aren't doing what we think. So what would we rather see, or what would action should people kind of take?
I think a critical look at the resource rooms in front of you. And people will give us argument after argument. It's a slower pace. It's more time to practice. It's a better connection, blah, blah, blah. And I want you to stop and walk into a resource room and do a little discourse analysis, do a little study. What's happening here? Because what we say is happening is not happening. And there's a much better way to educate kids, which is keep them in the general education setting and actually incorporate their goals right within the context of what they're learning. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.